going on, everybody? Kim Becker and Cody Rourke here for your weekly AMA when it comes to the Denver Broncos, brought to you by Mile High Sports. First and foremost, make sure that you are following Cody at Cody Rourke NFL, because he will send out this tweet weekly asking what questions you all may have when it comes to everything orange and blue. We will hop on here every Wednesday afternoon and answer your questions to the best of Cody's ability. And trust me, his ability is very high. So, Cody, we've got a lot of questions to get to first and foremost here today. And of course, we're going to start with the one that I'm sure is on most people's mind, and that is, will Russell Wilson be playing on Sunday versus the Cardinals?
This is a great question here, Kim, because obviously we saw on Sunday he made a valiant effort on a 3rd and 11 play, picked up 14 with his legs, dove to extend to get a touchdown. And he took a massive shot, not only from when he was going down, a Chiefs defender had his hand that really kind of smacked the back of the helmet for Russ. But when Russ also went into the ground, he hit helmet first. There was a hard impact on the ground, which is grass. And it was also cold. And even that means that the surface is very, very hard at that point. He had a massive goose egg on his head as it happened. And everyone was concerned because, you even had Chiefs players immediately signaling for the medical team to come out there. So that was kind of a scary moment on Sunday. And I think it's worth noting that because of the whole Tua Tagovailoa situation that happened a little bit early on this year, it forced the NFL to enact a little bit harsher, not necessarily harsher, but stricter protocol guidelines. So based on what we've seen with the concussion protocol and how things have gone, I would be shocked if Russell Wilson plays this week. Now, knowing the guy that Russell Wilson is, he's the ultimate competitor. He wants to do whatever he can to play. But at this point in time, Kim, the Broncos, they are 3-10. They are not going to gain anything by Russell Wilson coming back, trying to will his way to play. In my opinion, give Russ this week. Let him go through protocol. We have no idea at this point in time. Is he still dealing with any kind of symptoms, anything of that nature? All these things are critical for passing protocol. But based on the NFL's new standards, I would be shocked if we do see Russell Wilson play this week. I think Broncos fans should prepare for Brett Rippon versus Colt McCoy this Sunday at Empower Field a Mile High.
How do you see that one going?
It's going to be very interesting. I do think Jerry Jeudy will still be a very huge part of the offense for the Broncos, regardless if it's Brett Rippon, whether it's Russell Wilson. I think the thing to keep an eye on here too, especially with Colt McCoy, they struggled against the New England Patriots after having a little bit of, they were in it a little bit. Then the Cardinals just for some reason just could not find a way to deal with the pass rush that the Patriots had. The Broncos need to create a lot of pressure on Colt McCoy because he's not the type of guy like Kyler Murray. You don't necessarily have to worry about him getting outside the pocket and creating plays with his legs the way that Kyler Murray has throughout his career. He's probably going to force feed and look towards DeAndre Hopkins way quite a bit, who will be guarded by Patrick Surtain. I think maybe this could be a low-scoring game. I definitely would hammer the under if you are on the betting side of things this week when it comes to point totalage.
All right. Hey, I've been hammering the under when it comes to any Broncos games, really,
except
for the past several weeks, except for last week, right? Go figure. Okay, well, you just mentioned Jerry Jeudy a little bit and how he will play a role this coming weekend and, of course, the next few weeks going forward. But we do have a question sent in by a fan. Do you see George Paton picking up Jerry Jeudy's 5th-year option? And if not, do you envision a Garrett Bowles-like scenario?
At this point, I would be shocked if they don't pick up his 5th-year option at this point in time. Jerry, as we have all seen, and Kim, I have been hammering this point home for the last 2 years about Jerry Jeudy. Okay, last year under Pat Shurmur, he suffered the ankle injury in week 1, missed 7 weeks because of that. And, it looked like everyone thought he broke his leg in that game against the Giants. Luckily, that was not the case. Yeah. But when he came back, Pat Shurmur didn't even utilize him, just used him on jet motion and didn't even look his way, didn't even target, didn't even throw him the football. That was disappointing. This year, we've seen when Broncos quarterbacks have targeted Jerry Jeudy, when they have looked his way, good things have happened. The problem is through the beginning part of the season, they haven't done it enough. They've hardly looked his way. And Kim, here's something that's very, very astonishing. Okay, quarterbacks, when targeting Jerry Jeudy this season for the Broncos, they have a passer rating of 118. He's got 6 touchdowns on the year, obviously coming off of a 3-touchdown performance against the Kansas City Chiefs. You love to see that from Jerry. After that, Kendall Hinton doesn't have as many targets as Jerry Jeudy does, He's the next highest with a passer rating of 108 when targeted. Cortland Sutton, who leads the team in targets for this Broncos team this year, he has a quarterbacks have a passer rating of 72 when looking Cortland Sutton's way. So the advanced analytics, and when you actually look at when they give Jerry Jeudy the ball, they get him the ball across the middle of the field because of his route running ability, his ability to create separation against man coverage, and he's also finding ways to manipulate against zone coverage effectively. When they're throwing Jerry's way, great things are happening. In my opinion, Jerry Jeudy needs to be the focal point of the offense in these final 4 games of the season. He is wide receiver 1, in my true opinion. He's a dynamic playmaker, and he's the guy the Broncos need to focus on as their top dog at wide receiver going forward. So George Paton should pick up his 5th-year option. If he doesn't, Jerry Jeudy is going to be the type of guy that if, let's say, he doesn't make it in Denver, he goes somewhere else. Jerry Jeudy is going to be a huge thing with whatever team he goes to if he does not come back to the Denver Broncos in 2 years.
Well, his own determination. I mean, you saw how frustrated he got in the first quarter. Maybe it was the beginning of the second quarter this past Sunday. They showed it on TV. He was, shrugging guys off of him, and he was so frustrated about what was going on offense when they were getting shut out there in the beginning. I mean, the guy has determination. I know there's been a lot of fans and people saying that this Broncos team has nothing to play for. They don't care, but you see it in his eyes, what he wants to do and what he knows he's capable of. And I completely agree with you. He's going to be big no matter where he is. So it'd be silly for them not to pick it up here in Denver.
Yeah, no, Jerry is a very, very smart football player. Like, for the fact that he was able to move from his standard position, like they put him in the slot, they put him as the Z receiver, and then they also moved him to Cortland Sutton's role this past week at the X receiver position. So you have to know for him to know 3 different positions on the offense, even though he's playing receiver, right? How the landmarks that he has in his route running when he's lined up in the slot is different than when he's on the outside or when he's as the Z receiver used as a motion guy to get across the field. Like, he's one of the smartest players on the offensive side of the ball here for the Broncos. And the thing that drives me nuts, Kim, is that there's been this narrative. You see it all the time. Anytime you mention Jerry Jeudy, everyone's like, oh, he drops. When does he have drops? Like, okay, he does not even lead the team in drops here in 2022. He's not even close. Cortland Sutton leads the team in drops with 8 on this season. And everyone's equating Jerry Jeudy and drops to what happened in his rookie season where he had 10 drops on the year. 5 of them came in one game at the end of the season. So we have to get rid of that lazy, low-hanging fruit narrative, because who Jerry Jeudy was as a rookie dropping passes, that's not who Jerry Jeudy currently is in today's nature of the NFL in his 3rd year. He's not that guy.
No. Time to move on with that narrative with Jerry Jeudy. And we'll move on right here also. We've got our next question. Teams all around the league, especially the Denver Broncos, have been plagued by a seemingly abnormal amount of injuries this season. What is going on, Cody? And how does this affect locker room morale?
Well, this is a huge thing. Like, everybody is trying to figure out why the Broncos are so injured. And Kim, the one thing you're going to see when you bring up the Broncos and injuries, everyone's like, oh, it's the strength and conditioning staff. It's not the strength and conditioning staff. Anybody who has any expertise in kinesiology or even like the human body, physical exercise, science, things like that, you would understand that plays a part in it, right? Because the strength and conditioning coach's job and his responsibility is to keep strengthen the body, strengthen muscles, ligaments, so on and so forth. And then it's maintenance in the season. You're not looking to build in the season because you're playing one of the most physically, impactful sports in the world here. I think a lot of people are confusing strength and conditioning coach with head athletic trainer. Now, since Steve Greek-Antonopoulos has retired, there's obviously somebody new in the position in Vince Garcia. But the reality of the situation is, I don't know if you can necessarily blame one thing or the other, because Kim, you look at non-contact injuries, right? I think everyone's like, oh, well, since Lauren Lando took over, there's been more ACL injuries. There's been more Achilles injuries. I don't think correlation is causation in a situation like this. I think we can also look at other signs, like the collective bargaining agreement has changed, Kim, to where you're not allowed as much time on the field. You're not allowed to practice as much as you used to. You're not allowed to have as much contact in practice. I mean, you're very limited on contact. Most practices don't even contain contact anymore. Most of your contact is going to come in training camp. And so I don't know if it's one specific thing. I know that the Broncos ownership group is looking at every possible avenue for that. It's simple things like athletes' diet, how hydrated they are they getting exposure? Right? We all have a phone, right? So it's like at night, how long are they spending looking at their phone with the blue light? that also has an impact on your body potentially being injured. Oh, not to mention, we're all here at altitude training. So you're at elevation. That has an impact on the physical body as well. Not to mention playing surface also has that. There's just so many factors, Kim. I don't think that we can blame one specific person for that. I mean, that's the popular thing to do, looking to fire anybody and everybody when something's not going right. But the reality is there's so many different things that have to be considered. I'll be very intrigued, but kind of to the point about morale, I mean, it absolutely impacts, I would say, your morale as a team, just because like you ask yourself, and I know we ask ourselves as media members, you ask yourself maybe as a player, like, man, what would it be like if we had like Tim Patrick? What would it be like if we had Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler all healthy? What would it be like if we had Garrett Bowles healthy at the left tackle position? What would happen if we had Ronald Darby healthy at the cornerback spot? Like, just all these injuries that have impacted Denver, it stinks. Like, Denver's probably been the most injured team this year, but there's other teams like the San Francisco 49ers, the New York Giants, who are really a step right behind Denver. So it's not just the Broncos. Injuries are up across the National Football League at an astronomical rate. I think a lot of that is attributed to playing surface, some of the things that I mentioned, not to mention the collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And you mentioned a couple other teams, the Rams also. It seems like every quarterback in this league has gotten injured. I mean, it's everywhere. It's not just the Denver Broncos. I know this question was geared more towards Denver, of course, and just obviously when you're paying close attention to this team, you notice injuries so much. But if you go look all across the board at all of these teams, their injury report is extensive before every single matchup. It is such a bummer to see, but it's part of the game. Also, you mentioned it. It's the most physical game in the entire world. I mean, this is why they can only play one game a week, because their bodies need at least a week to be able to heal. That's why you hear so much about short weeks and why they don't like playing on Thursday nights. It truly is it's truly the most insanely physical thing, and injuries are bound to happen. So yes, it's frustrating. Obviously, we all agree with you on that one, Cody. And of course,
it's a great question sent in by whoever sent that in. A fantastic question.
It's a fantastic question, because everyone's frustrated by it and everyone wants answers, but unfortunately, there's just no black and white answer when it comes to this. In my opinion, in my expert opinion, which is not actually expert, that's just my opinion. But we'll move right along here because we've got quite a few, but I know we can go on about a lot of these. Let's talk about the offensive line with the needs on the O-line, especially tackle. Are there any players that stand out in the draft, and could the Broncos make a splash in free agency?
Well, I'm not at that point of my season yet, right? Usually once the season is over, I start looking at free agents first. Like, okay, who are some available free agents at the offensive tackle position or other positions of need? And then once I look at, okay, hey, here's that. Once I see what the Broncos do in free agency, I'm like, all right, here's where they could be looking in the NFL draft. But here's what I know about George Paton. George Paton has never really been the guy in the NFL draft to draft based on need. That's one thing we haven't seen. They really address needs in free agency, and then they go out and then they add wants or developmental talents or best player available in the NFL draft. That's what we've seen from George Paton so far through 2 NFL drafts. So for me, I think if we look at history, we look at what he's been able to do, I think a lot of the issues that the Broncos have, I think he's going to look in free agency, right? So let's take a look at the offensive line. I do not believe he is going to add an offensive tackle in free agency, because when you look at some of the names that are available, a lot of guys are older, like 36, 37, 33 years old. They've been in the league for quite some time. They have injury histories, things like that. There's nobody that I feel like when I've looked at spot tracks, pending free agents at the offensive tackle position, specifically right tackle, there's nobody that I feel like will come in and give the Broncos what they need. So that's a huge thing. So we could see the Broncos look in the NFL draft. They will have a first-round pick. It'll be a late round 1 pick if the 49ers continue to win games. So I'm expecting the Broncos to pick anywhere between 25 and 32. I think that's where San Fran is going to end up finishing. So I would not be shocked if the Broncos look at drafting a right tackle, right? Because for them, they have not had a solidified guy at right tackle for years. It's just been 1 year patchwork rotational guys there. With Garrett Bowles anticipated to come back from his broken leg, he's going to be the left tackle next year, more than likely for the Broncos. You need to address right tackle for the foreseeable future. Now, I think you already have your right guard in Quinn Miners. I think he's the guy at that position. However, Dalton Reisner at left guard, his contract is expiring. He has yet to receive a contract offer or even an extension talk from the Broncos. And then you have Lloyd Cushenberry, who, quite frankly, as much as I love Lloyd Cushenberry, he has struggled at the center position to be a solidified guy who could hold his own, an anchor down there on the O-line. I imagine that Denver's going to have a brand new left guard. I think they're going to have a brand new center. I think they're going to have a brand new right tackle going into next season. The question is, who is it going to be? Right now, we have to see what they do in free agency, but then we can start looking at potential prospects. And I think that on the offensive line, that's where we're going to look specifically at right tackle. Defensively, you can make the argument the Broncos need a solidified dog at the edge rusher position. They traded away Bradley Chubb, and since then they've really struggled to get pressure on quarterbacks from the outside. We look at guys like Max Crosby. We look at other guys that the Broncos have played this season that have been on the outside that have wreaked havoc against the Broncos. Denver simply right now does not have that. I think that's a huge thing they need to take a look at. They could even take a look at wide receivers. So do not be surprised the Broncos maybe trade a guy like Cortland Sutton during the NFL draft or during free agency, something along those lines, as George Payton looks to recoup some more draft picks and try to build going forward. I mean, Kim, there are so many possibilities in the NFL draft. It's hard to imagine where they may go just yet.
It is. It's hard, and it's still early, and who knows what's going to happen from here on out. But it seems like there's some holes that need to be filled kind of across the board right now, but that's another topic that we can talk about later. Let's stay on the subject of the offensive line. We have one more question. What path will the organization take with the O-line this offseason? We kind of touched on a little bit, but if you want to elaborate a little, Cody.
I mean, I think kind of I might have jumped the gun and answered that in the last question. I think that, as we mentioned, left guard, center, right tackle, probably going to be entirely different players on this team in 2023. Who is it going to be at this point? We have yet to figure that out. We will see, though. I think once we get closer to free agency, I think that's where the Broncos' focus is going to start off initially. Edge rusher, I think they're also going to look at that as well. But yeah, I think that's definitely kind of answered that one already. I think that you'll have Miners and you'll have Bulls back next season for the Broncos as the main two guys.
Perfect. Okay, well, before we wrap this up, we've got a clip from your radio show, you and Anilo. Broncos safety Nick Ferguson joined you guys on Afternoon Drive to talk about the quarterback of Pat Surtain and kind of comparing him to someone that he knows quite well. So we'll play this clip, and then we'll have a little follow-up question for this one, Cody.
I played with arguably the best corner to ever lace him up in Champ Bailey. And guess what? He, too, was victimized by certain plays, but he never gave up. And that's what I see in PS2, right? The idea of never giving up. Yes, you may get beat, but he is a complete corner.
Hard to argue that.
You love that, I bet.
Yeah, in terms of like Patrick Surtain, I mean, Kim, he is such a special player. When you watch him, like watching him up close and personal, watching him at practice, watching him, like he's just so technically refined. Like he focuses every day on his technique. How can he get the advantage against a receiver? I mean, this is a guy that studies the game so much outside of just practice. Like he lives and breathes the film room, which, I mean, for me as a coach, I love that. Like I wish when I was coaching, I wish more of my players watched more film as much as I did there. But Surtain, I mean, in terms of where he ranks amongst the entire National Football League, Kim, I think you can really make a legit argument that, like, he is a top 2 cornerback based on how he's playing, his production. And granted, he has had, I think for the first time in his career so far through 2 seasons in Denver, he has had 2 games where he has struggled, where he has looked human a little bit. But that's okay, right? Because in comparison to other cornerbacks, his tape is unbelievably further along than most cornerbacks in the National Football League. So he did have a little bit of a rough performance against the Devontae Adams, big time game that he had in overtime, and the Broncos lost to the Las Vegas Raiders. And then again, the next week against DJ Moore, he gave up a couple of big catches there. That's something that he's like, I got to keep battling. He takes that personally. And ultimately, I think he's going to be in a really good spot. He is legit. I would take him 10 times out of 10 if I had to choose in the NFL draft. Everyone wants to have the hindsight revisionist history. I would have drafted Justin Fields, Micah Parsons. I would have drafted Patrick Surtain 10 times out of 10, and I would still do that.
That's amazing. All right, Cody. Well, thank you so much to everybody listening. Thank you for tuning in. And don't forget to join us every Wednesday afternoon right here at Mile High Sports. And of course, don't forget to follow Cody on Twitter so that you can see that tweet and send in your questions when it comes to the Denver Broncos. We will hop on here every Wednesday afternoon and answer them, or do our best to. I should not say if this is Cody answering. I'm just here hanging out. But this is all Cody's expertise. We appreciate you guys being here, Cody. I appreciate you, and I will see you next Wednesday.
You're the best, Kim. Appreciate you.